Modern technologies, such as social media, have rendered us self-sufficient. We no longer need other people, not in the flesh anyhow. We can, and many of us do, lead isolated lives in our caves known as apartments, with Netflix and, in the best case, 2 cats. And so this is the postmodern lifestyle. And I think we are lucky, because when people come together nowadays, it's a union of hatred and envy and rage. Negative effects have become the new social glue. I would even say the exclusive social glue. People don't come together anymore in order to further any causes in any meaningful way. I'm not talking about narcissistic virtue signaling. People don't do empathy, they don't do love, they don't do bonding and attachment and marriage and committed relationships. They don't do any of this. They do hatred, they do envy, they do rage, they do nihilistic destruction, they revel, they cherish, they flourish in the demise of the other. And who is this other? It's not the billionaires. The billionaires are a species unto their own. There's nothing you can envy in a billionaire. It's so way out of the reach of most people that billionaires are perceived as living on another planet, an alien extraterrestrial species visiting Earth from time to time. So there's no envy there. But you, as an uneducated, underpaid, ridiculed, discriminated against, overlooked human being, you would envy your neighbor, your middle-class neighbor, who is better educated, is better paid, is esteemed and cherished and valued. You would envy that person. The underpaid, lower middle classes and working class, they envy the middle class. They don't envy the billionaires. On the very contrary, they weaponize billionaires against the middle class. It is the middle class, including public intellectuals, professors, the elites, medical doctors, experts, people who leverage their education and knowledge in order to make money and survive and thrive. They are the target. They are the target of the mob. They are the target of the emerging ochlocracy. They are the target of the weaponized oligarchs. They are the target of the hatred movement, of the envy movement, of the rage movement, of the nihilistic movement, which passes for politics nowadays. So aren't we better off isolated from each other? Aren't we much safer when we do not collaborate, when we do not collude, when we do not conspire to destroy each other? I think we are. Moreover, I believe that being alone is the natural state, and that having been forced to work with each other in close proximity, to collaborate with each other on anything from reproduction to recreation to production, manufacturing, having been forced to do this, it created a lot of pent-up resentment and hatred and envy and rage and other negative effects. I think our natural state is to be alone. And the abnormal state is having to deal with other people, which sucks. It's onerous, it's difficult, it's disgusting. Other people suck. And so leaders like Donald Trump and Erdogan and Netanyahu and Putin and Modi and Milei and many others, such leaders, and Orbán of course, such leaders leverage these negative effects, this hatred, this envy, this rage against the other, which is the same like me, but has done better in life. Same like me, but more educated. Same like me, but better paid. Same like me, but, goes on vacations constantly. Same like me, but has a functional family. Same like me. Not an oligarch, Not a billionaire, which is way beyond my reach and absolutely not the same like me, but people who are the same like me, but have won a hand in the lottery of life. And so populist leaders leverage this aggression, and thrive on it, and construct whole empires and patronage networks and political parties centered around this. And so at the current moment in history, we are far better alone than together. Togetherness nowadays, the intimacy of the masses, the hive mind, the cult mind, they are existential threats to the human species. We should thank modern technology for pulling us apart, from preventing us from interacting meaningfully with others. Because when we do, we get MAGA. When we do, we get Netanyahu's party, the Likud, the right wings. When we do, we get Putin. And when we do, we get Hitler. You're about to watch an interview I've had, and regrettably the interviewer refused to allow me to upload the raw unedited exchange. So what you're about to watch is a censored, edited version, which I disavow and do not endorse. But still, it's better than nothing.
Dear listeners, today I have something a little different, and I think you'll find it fascinating. In the last episode, I used the theories of Vaknan and Hegel to explore the narcissism embedded in Western spiritualism. And it occurred to me afterwards that only one of these theorists is dead. The other is a brilliant, eloquent speaker who could present his own ideas far better than a third party interpreting them. This week, you'll hear directly from Professor Sam Vaknan himself, one of the most recognised and, yes, controversial voices on narcissism. Now, we come at this topic from different angles. Professor Vaknan goes deep into aspects of his theory that may not have been laid out before. His view that narcissism arises from the human condition itself, and that the power structures around us simply reflect this inherent nature. Now, if you're a regular listener, you'll know that I lean more towards seeing power structures as integral to our atomization, and as fostering narcissistic traits as coping mechanisms. So, after Sam's articulation of his theory, we move into a broader discussion. And this isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about exploring different perspectives to better understand and hopefully better address the challenges of connection and disconnection in our time. So no single lens has the whole truth. And the more angles we bring to loneliness and isolation, the better equipped we are to deal with them. So our conversation is a long one, and one thing that Sam and I absolutely agree on is not censoring opinion. So I'll be bringing you this in two parts. Part 2 will be out next week, and this week I invite you to listen with curiosity and to notice what resonates for you and what doesn't, because the questions we ask about human nature shape how we see the roles of culture and power. Now, if this is your first time here, I'm Reyne, a philosophy graduate with a severe allergy to self-help gurus, and this is The Loneliness Industry, a podcast where we examine the forces that shape our ability or inability to connect. Now, Professor Vaknan, I suspect you don't need much of an introduction, especially if anyone has Googled the word narcissist after a mind-bending breakup. But in case anyone listening opted to go into hiding due to society's current state, Professor Vaknan is the author of Malignant Self-Love, a pioneer in the field of narcissism studies and one of the most controversial and most cited voices on pathological narcissism. This is the man who coined most of the language we have today when it comes to narcissistic types, tactics and behaviours. In the mid-90s, Professor Vaknan was almost the sole voice on understanding narcissism as pathology. Slightly less well known is the fact that he also delves deep into narcissism as a more general requirement of being in Western cultures. A professor of psychology, a former economic advisor, and someone whose work has not only shaped the online understanding of narcissism, but has also ignited intense debate across academic and clinical spheres. He is also, and I say this with great admiration, impossible to reduce to a single label. So instead of trying, let's hear directly from the man himself. Sam, thank you for agreeing to speak on The Loneliness Industry. It is an honour to have you here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction. I barely recognize myself in it.
I've listened to enough of your stuff by now that everything I'm saying is true. You are unclassifiable. So I'm going to start with the first question here. I'm going to move from the personal to the relational with this question. One of the recurring themes in the loneliness industry is how narcissistic systems, whether individual or institutional, create profound loneliness by severing us from real connection. So before we zoom out to the societal patterns, let's begin with the individual in their relational context. How does narcissism create disconnection, both internally for the narcissist and externally for those in relationship with them?
I don't think that narcissism creates loneliness. I think it's rather the other way around. I think loneliness creates or triggers narcissistic defenses. And with your kind permission, if you were to suffer me for the next 5 minutes, I will try to give an overview of how I see things, what has led to what, the
Yes,
chain
please.
of causation, and so on. And perhaps based on that, we could go on tangents and explore additional territories and so on.
Sounds good.
Start with the foundational, indisputable, non-controversial fact that we all need to be seen. And this starts in early childhood. This starts when you're a newborn. The first thing a newborn does is attract attention. A newborn who fails at attracting attention is a newborn with a very limited life expectancy. And so the need to be seen is a survival strategy experienced subjectively as a need. Actually, it's about survival. It is through the gaze of other people that we derive initially sustenance, food, shelter, changing of diapers, for those of us who are lucky. And then later on in life, it is the gaze of others that defines us. It is through the gaze of others that we acquire the sense of existing. Existence is not a given. Absolutely not. People think that existence just is part and parcel of being human or being an organism. That's not true. It's not part and parcel of sentience. It's not part and parcel of consciousness. It's not the sense of uninterrupted, continuous core that is immutable, always there. The sense of being, the sense of what we call the self, the boundaries between you and the world stops here and I start, and I stop here and the world starts, and all these are just forms of internalized gaze, other people's gaze. That's not Sam Vaknan, that's Lacan, actually. And so the first instance of a defining gaze is ineluctably, the mother's gaze. It is through the mother's gaze that the newborn acquires a sense of selfhood. But mind you, it comes at a cost, and the cost is trauma. It's very traumatizing to realize that you are not a part of mother and mother is not a part of you. To realize that mother is a separate, external entity with a mind of her own, autonomous and independent and agentic. It's terrifying because it means it translates into an innate sense of loss of control. The symbiotic phase where the baby and mother are one is very anxiolytic. It reduces anxiety. The baby is not anxious because there's nobody out there. Baby and mother are one. But then suddenly, through mother's gaze, the baby becomes separate. Bear with me, I'm leading somewhere. I'm even going to answer your question, shockingly, ultimately. But we absolutely need this background because the need to be seen, of course, has vast social, societal, cultural, and commercial implications. And so we start with this fact. And then every time we experience someone else's gaze, we also re-experience the original trauma. Because it is true, someone else's gaze evinces, documents our separateness. When we encounter someone else's gaze, it is the moment in time where we feel most alone. most lonely, because the gaze tells us, the main bit of information in the gaze is, I am not you. When someone is gazing at you, at the very same moment, the communication is, I am not you, and you are not me. We are separate to each other. We're not the same. We are not symbiotic. We are not one organism. Well, and so this separateness creates existential angst. It's as if the intersubjective space is suddenly becomes unbridgeable, intraversible. The extreme existential loneliness comes about only when you compare yourself to other people. You know that you're lonely because you are aware of the existence of other people.
May I ask you a question for clarification? Are you talking about a failure in the mirror stage, to bridge the mirror stage where one separates from the mother? Because you're talking about Lacan here. So is this a failure? Is this a failure in individuation, as Jung would possibly refer to it, where because you failed at the mirror stage to say, I am separate in a comfortable fashion?
No, this
No?
is not.
Okay.
This is not a part of. This is not a failure. This is the common human condition.
Okay.
I'm talking about every human being. Every human being goes through the experience of the mother's gaze, the alienating mother's gaze. Every human being consequently realizes his or her separateness from mother. Every human being is traumatized by this realization. And every future gaze to the day you die provokes or triggers this initial trauma with the primordial gaze. Why? Because when you are the subject of someone else's gaze, it is clear that your separateness becomes incontestable. It is through someone else's gaze that you realize how alone you are. Your loneliness or your aloneness is in contradistinction to the existence of other people.
Is this an impossibility of being truly seen? Because it sounds like even if I were to attempt to understand you to the best of my capacity, that I would ultimately fail, and that my failure, despite maybe I get it, I don't know, 70% right, whatever is the highest percentage, you would still feel completely alienated even by my attempts.
Which is precisely why I said a bit earlier that it evinces the failure or the unbridgeability or of the intersubjective space.
Okay.
So because the intersubjective space can never be traversed, can never be crossed, the other is never accessible. Never accessible, never comprehensible, never meaningful.
Never fully graspable. Yes.
Never fully graspable, yes.
And you're right, that various philosophers...
In abstraction of a kind. But it is the existence of that untouchable, impermeable, unbridgeable, inaccessible entity that allows you to realize your own separate existence. And the separateness is so solipsistic, so total, that it triggers the primordial trauma of your aloneness. It provokes anxiety. Existential angst, according to Sartre, is the outcome of the need to choose, the need to make choices. Whereas I think it's much more profound. I think in my work, existential angst is about realizing how alone you are, and there's little you can do about it.
Sounds like you mean it's an inherent aspect of the human condition.
It's an inherent aspect of being human, yes, of grasping the outside world. The minute you grasp the outside world.
You've preempted a question I want to ask later on, but it fits here because you do talk in previous interviews about the process of atomization. And it was quite a long time ago. I think it's about 7 years ago, the interview I was watching. And you referred to the atomization of people in modern capitalist societies, saying that we're not as reflected as we used to be, and therefore we seek it elsewhere. But it sounds like that your theory has developed further along since that interview, because it sounds now like it's inherent. You can't be atomized if you're inherently isolated.
Your questions are excellent, and don't misunderstand my responses as implying some kind of criticism or anything.
No, I want explanations. Yeah, I want
difficult
expansion would be good.
Yeah, difficult to wrap your mind around it.
Yeah.
While the bridge to another person is impossible, the intersubjective space is a myth. It's nonsense.
Okay.
You could never, ever, in principle, access another person's mind. Another person's mind is a domain that is out of access, out of reach, in principle. So this invention or this convention of the intersubjective space is nonsense, I'm sorry to say. And with it, of course, equally nonsensical is the concept of empathy.
Okay.
Einfühlen in German, like you feel like one. How can you feel like one? You're never one.
Yeah.
Except when you are 6 months old. Yeah. Empathy was invented shockingly by a German. The
It is shocking.
Yes, the original word was Einfühlen. So the intersubjective space is a convention or a myth that we have concocted in order to reduce our level of anxiety. If we were to confront the truth that other people are forever outside our reach and that their gaze is traumatizing and alienating because it informs us of our own essential existential aloneness, solipsistic aloneness, yes. So if we were to accept this, we would go mad. All of us will go mad. And this is where I revert to your question. Part of this mythology is the gaze. The gaze is perceived counterfactually as some kind of bridge. The defining gaze makes you come alive. The defining gaze imbues you with a sense of existence, with a sense of selfhood, and with boundaries. It is a defining gaze that gives rise to you. And yet, it's a figment of mythology. It's not real. What is a defining gaze? It's a story we are telling ourselves. It's a narrative that we invent. But still, in this particular restricted sense, it does exist. Even narratives and myths and fiction have power. They exist. I mean, narratives exist. They have an existence of their own. And so the defining gaze is crucial. Albeit counterfactual, it's crucial. The same way, for example, that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is counterfactual, but pretty crucial. So, and we are willing to pay a price in order to secure a defining gaze. And the price is socializing with other people. Yeah. I think we socialize with other people because we consume indefinitely their defining gaze. We need the defining gaze. We depend on it. We disappear in the absence of this defining gaze, or at least we experience ourselves as dissipating, as if we were dissipating or disappearing. We need the gaze. The gaze is like fuel. Like food. It maintains us, keeps us alive. And the price we pay is that we have to spend time with other people, because other people have a monopoly on the defining gaze. You cannot obtain the defining gaze from an animal, cannot obtain defining gaze from a bacterium or from the government. Defining gaze comes from other people. You have to socialize with them. I'm saying you have to socialize with them because I think the normal state is to be alone. I think society, socializing, are the abnormal states.
I wanted to ask you that. So under your theory, so correct me if I'm wrong here too, those that experience deep-seated loneliness, really, I guess we're going to put a Lacanian lens on it, are as close as we can come to encountering the horror of the real, because this is an inherent part of the human condition. So loneliness in that sense, and in terms of your theory and Lacanian theory, is perhaps not a pandemic or something like this. It is actually people slowly coming to terms with the inherent isolation of existence, and like I said, as close as you can come to the horror of the real.
Yes, I would attribute it to a failure of fantasy.
Yeah.
We'll come to it in a minute or two. Okay. I beg your pardon for drawing it out, but it is
no, please talk, Sam. Please talk.
Yeah. I have sometimes to repeat myself so that I penetrate, the viewers.
I do that too. I call it a process of iterative refinement. It's
Yes.
fine.
Yes, and there are defenses here.
Yeah.
There are resistances.
Yeah.
People are not willing to hear this message.
Yeah.
I'm not pretending that the truth value of my message is established, but at least it's an interesting proposition to be
Yes.
considered. And people are not willing to do even this. So, to summarize the first part of my introductory comments, we all need a defining gaze, and we're paying the price by having to socialize with other people. Spending time with other people sucks. Other people consume energy. Other people are difficult. Most people are abrasive. The friction is unpleasant. To spend time with other people is a horrific experience.
That's very Sartrean.
and yet, yes, hell is the other person. Although it's taken out of context, but yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's a joke.
And so we're willing to pay this price because they have a monopoly on the defining gaze. They have a monopoly on the food, let's say.
Yeah.
And suddenly, the biggest revolution in human history has occurred 20 years ago. We have succeeded to generate a machine gaze. We've succeeded to generate a virtual gaze or an artificial gaze that is indistinguishable from the human defining gaze. So we succeeded not only to generate technologies that provide people with a gaze, but we succeeded to convince the consumers of this gaze that this gaze is as good as a human gaze. And I'm talking about social media, I'm talking about artificial intelligence, and I'm talking about the oncoming metaverse. This trio of technologies, they provide an artificial gaze which is indistinguishable from a human gaze or perceived subjectively as a human gaze, and is cost-free in the sense that you do not have to socialize with people in order to consume this gaze. And the inevitable outcome of this is that people gave up on other people. Yeah. With alacrity and cheer, lovingly, they gave up on other people. I can prove it to you. During the pandemic, people were told to work from home. Pandemic has ended, and people were asked to return to the office. More than 40% of them resigned rather than return to the office. When we asked them in various studies, why did you give up on your job rather than return to the office? They said, because I can't stand my colleagues anymore. I don't want to spend time with them. That's one example. And of course, the atomization that you mentioned. The fact that 40+% of adults in Western industrialized countries are choosing to be lifelong singles. The fact that a much larger percentage among people under the age of 25 haven't had sex in the previous year or any romantic encounter with the opposite sex or with the same sex. And the fact that 52% of adults now live with their parents rather than establish an independent life, and so on and so forth. All the indications are that given the choice between a machine-generated gaze and a human-generated gaze, people are opting in droves. People are choosing the machine-generated gaze.
My question though is that done with joy and alacrity, or because what I see from the people that listen to the podcast, this happens with a lot of despair for some people. And I do think there's a distinction to be drawn between the kind of context and the kind of gaze that exists in the workplace and the kind of context and gaze that, say, exists with a group of your friends when you're at a festival drinking. These contexts they have a different level of stress and a different level of performativity that is required. So I'm not sure. I agree with you that people seem that statistically they're choosing the machine gaze in droves. But I would argue that it's not necessarily out of joy and alacrity. I think that some of it is out of despair and the failure and the ability to connect through the increased desire, the increased requirement for performativity in many contexts, which is just exhausting, as you elaborated on earlier. All of these expectations from human beings.
I make a bit of a different distinction. I don't see the despair at all. Okay. It is a choice. It is a choice, and it's extremely easy to socialize. Socializing is the smoothest, easiest, type of activity. There are no barriers to entry, and you can do it within a split second in a supermarket, on your way to work, on your way back from work, whatever.
I'm glad
Social
you find it
media.
that easy. I don't. Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
I think that there is a more fundamental problem.
Uh-huh.
I don't see despair. I see a choice.
Okay.
However, I see a choice that could lead to the perception of dysfunctionality. In other words, I divide humanity now to two groups. One who are adept at manipulating fantasy or existing in fantasy, within fantasy, and one who are not. One group comprised of people who are not. People who are good with fantasy and people who are not good with fantasy. When you're not good with fantasy, this is what we call loneliness, and this is what we call despair. It's the failure. It's a fantasy failure. Failure to leverage fantasy in a way which will be conducive not only to functioning but to well-being. Whereas a growing percentage of a population, and in the future the entire population, are becoming more and more adept at constructing fantasies, inhabiting them, manipulating them, sustaining them, and subsisting in them. Fantasy is the new organizing principle. Reality is out. If you're not good at fantasy, you would feel, of course, lonely, and you would be desperate. The desperation, I claim, is not because you fail to connect and not because you don't have other people in your life. That is a relief. The desperation is that you can't find a substitute for this. You need a defining gaze, and if you're not good in fantasy, you're unlikely to obtain a defining gaze, even a machine gaze.
This is really interesting, Sam. So, to me, from what I know about your theories of narcissism, those that are good at constructing, believing in, and manipulating to maintain a fantasy, you've drawn the distinction between essentially those with narcissistic tactics that work and those who either don't have them or who are not narcissistic. The issue I have with it is that the maintaining of a fantasy, well, perhaps it actually fits with your theory, to be honest. To maintain the fantasy is quite a lot easier when there are no people involved to contradict your fantasy and opinion. You can do it far more easily with machines, let's say. So then we've got two groups of people, one of which is, good at creating fantasy, but would choose machines because it's a lot easier. And those who don't, who still potentially seek social connection and potentially don't. Or clarify, please.
To my mind, no one seeks social connection if they can avoid it. The problem is some people can't avoid it. They cannot avoid it because they cannot secure an alternative source of a defining gaze. That's my theory.
Yeah.
I think if you're successful in interacting with artificial gaze or virtual gaze generators, you become a solipsistic narcissist. Narcissism or narcissistic solipsism consists of two elements. One, a great capacity for fantasy. I would call it fantasy eloquence.
Okay.
And a second element is a capacity for introjection, a capacity of converting other people into internal objects and then manipulating these internal objects to great effect. And you could look at it another way and say that solipsistic narcissism is about creating fantasies and then immediately internalizing them. Internalizing the fantastic space. And then within the fantastic space, you have internal objects that represent other people. So people who are good at these two things, they're good at converting other people to internal objects, and they're good at constructing fantastic spaces and populate these fantastic spaces with these internal objects. These people are narcissists.
And they're well adapted to the system that's developing right now. Yes.
And these people are happy. They don't need or want other people. It's a burden. However, not everyone is as adept and as capable of accomplishing these. And so these are the people who are left dangling and hanging, and to their great detriment and despair.
And this is my point, yes, that there are
the despair is not because they're failing to connect.
Okay.
The despair is because they need to connect. They are coerced into connecting. I beg to differ. I don't think the locus of the
Explain the coercion part to me, please.
I don't feel that the locus of despair is because they fail to connect with other people.
Okay.
I think the locus of despair is because they have no other alternative but to connect to other people. I think the locus of despair is because they are failures, a condition we call narcissistic collapse. I think they're in a collapse state. So
then we've got two groups
ideally,
where there's a narcissist succeeding at using the tools, and then there's just other narcissists that are failing at using the tools, and no one who isn't one. I mean, I know this fits with your broader theory of society, actually, but these are the two groups that you're defining here.
I think everyone would like to be independent of other people. I think that's the driving force. That has been the driving force in hunter-gatherer societies. And that's how humanity started, not with collaboration, not with cooperation. This is nonsense. Collaboration and cooperation started with the agricultural revolution and with urbanization, not before. Before that, there were tiny, isolated groups of people. They worked together ad hoc, but they didn't form any social kind of social networks or whatever. They were ad hoc teams. So urbanization and agriculture started it all. Now, today I think technology allows us to go back, to revert to our natural state. And our natural state is to be all alone. Only some people are not good yet, are not skilled enough to accomplish this blessed state. And
this is a theory of the human condition. So essentially,
yes.
Paul, you're saying the human condition has a drive to be independent, to be alone. The issue I do have with that is just that historically speaking, it is pretty much impossible to put ourselves into the mental headspace of people that lived hundreds of thousands of years or thousands of years ago. We actually don't have access to what they were valuing, how their life, how they had meaning, what sort of values they'd internalized, and whether for them it felt like, yeah, you know what, I'd rather be alone. Jack's really pissing me off, or whether they just thought this is a wider part of me, which is what some cultures to this day report. Some cultures don't have a word for I, because there's this sort of a wider, you'd possibly call it a wider circle of the solipsistic world. However, I think if you base all of this on the premise that the human condition at its core has a drive to be completely independent, you encounter problems with that. Not everyone's going to agree with you.
I don't think so at all. When you expand your definition of yourself and you say there's no I, but there's only the collective, that's a fantasy. And that is when you internalize other people as internal objects.
What would be if that's fantasy, how do you define reality?
Reality is that people are external and separate to you.
Okay.
If you consider everyone to be part of the same organism or meta or mega organism, then that's a shared fantasy. And other people are figments of your mind. They're figments of your imagination. They're internal objects. It's in effect a kind of narcissistic state.
I was going to say, this does sound a lot like projection of the narcissistic state onto.
It is a narcissistic state.
Yeah. So the human condition is inherently narcissistic and projective.
Yes, I think the natural state of human beings is to be all alone, to pay the minimal price of interacting with other people because they need food or shelter or defining gaze or whatever, that they need something. And the path of least resistance is to minimize these interactions, not to increase them, not to enhance them, but to minimize them. And we have been constructing technologies. We've been on a technological binge for hundreds, if not thousands of hundreds of years, definitely. Technological binge that sought to render us more and more self-sufficient and self-contained. And it culminated with the emergence of computing, social media, artificial intelligence, and so on. We now really don't need other people. And many of us are choosing exactly this. It's a choice, make no mistake about it. I disagree completely that it is out of your hands. It's absolute choice. to be atomized, to be alone with your two cats and Netflix, that's a choice. That's an absolute choice. And Pew Center, for example, agree with me. But I think when we mention societies, collectivist societies, where the individual is subsumed in the collective and assumes the collective's identity, that is the ultimate narcissistic condition, because that is a shared fantasy, shared fantastic space where everyone is someone else's internal object. There's a single organism or single self, and everyone is just a figments in this mind, in this collective mind, so it's a colony. It's a colony approach, kind of.
What happens if we substitute the word fantasy for connectedness? Because, these other people are facts. They do actually objectively exist out there. They go and pay their taxes. If they punch you in the face, you know how factual they are. And of course, our memories of them, you could argue, are, the internalized objects. However, I think that it's a very loaded term to say that this is all fantasy. My idea that I'm connected with other people is fantasy. And I do come back to the point that we can't actually occupy the mental space of people, whether or not they had a word for I, me, just one human being, or it was a broader definition. We still are unaware of whether they were thinking, as I said, it'd be way better if I could just hang out on my own. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have the technology to do that. So I'm going to have to help Bob with his hunting.
We have ultimately to rely on observations of behaviors, of social structures and so on, and derive from them speculatively the state of mind of the people who have constructed them. So if we see people who, for example, spend time within a social cell of 5 other people, have the opportunity to form a much bigger cell and decline it and even become violent when they're confronted with the possibility, which is the history of the clash between hunter-gatherers and farmers. Farming, agriculture coexisted with hunter-gatherer societies for about 1,000, perhaps up to 3,000 years. There's a debate. Hunter-gatherers chose not to become farmers and even try to exterminate farming or destroy agriculture. There was the famous battle between nomads and hunter-gatherers and agriculture. Cities were consistently being attacked and molested by hunter-gatherer societies, nomads, and so on and so forth. So it's not as if there was a linear transition from tiny social groups to much bigger social groups, indicating clearly a preference for much bigger social groups. Exactly the opposite. So
I do think it's hard to extrapolate, though, simply from, and there's a lot of debate in archaeology too, how we do project from our current temporal location our own values onto past culture.
That's endless. That's endless. I mean,
it's endless.
This kind of argument is endless.
Yeah, exactly. So if it's okay with you, because I do really appreciate the development of your theories, and I haven't heard it to this level of depth before, so thank you, Sam. But there is, just because sticking to my podcast theme, I would actually like to, because last episode I used your theories, as I said, to talk about Western spiritualism and the narcissism and solipsism within that. So in your work, you describe narcissism not as a fixed state, but as a kind of a psychological cycle. And I'm especially interested in how the covert narcissist often longs to become overt, and how the overt narcissist might collapse back into a covert state, especially after some kind of failure to maintain power or the fantasy or control. So would you be able to take us through that internal cycle, how these two states relate and what drives the shift between them? I mean, it sounds very dialectic to me, a dialectic tension going on.
I promise to answer your question, but I think we have left a corner of our previous topic uncovered.
Okay.
And I think it's a very important corner.
Yep.
Because when I said that technologies now render people self-sufficient and people are delighted with this and they're making a choice to be alone, one way of buttressing this argument is looking at the features of the technology, whether this is an inadvertent byproduct or side effect of the technology, or whether it's a built-in feature. In other words, is it a
This is the
feature or
issue.
a
Which
bug?
causes which?
Yes, a feature or a bug.
Mm.
And I claim that modern technologies have the aloneness feature. They have aloneness or loneliness as a feature, not as a bug.
Yes. Oh, I
And
agree with you there.
I will give four examples, and then I'll cover your question.
Mm.
Number one, intimacy challenges the business models of these technologies.
Yeah.
If you spend time with people, you're not spending time on the screen. Your eyeballs cannot be monetized. It detracts, it reduces the profits of these companies. So they want you to be alone. They don't want you to be with other people.
Mm.
Ironically, social media is completely asocial.
Yeah, we call it asocial media. Yeah.
For Zuckerberg to make more money, he needs you to be single, not have children, not have a spouse, not have a boyfriend, not spend time with other people.
Yes.
He needs you to spend all this time on Facebook. Number two.
Can I interject there, though, because that is about power structures and not necessarily some emergent, something that we have all desired and then given up to other people to allow to put into action.
These technologies, it's documented, have been designed with the help of psychologists and sociologists and even anthropologists.
That doesn't stop them being part of power structures, however.
I don't know what is a power structure. I know that if there is a technology that discourages certain human behavior or certain human state of mind, then, it stands to reason. I don't need to be very convoluted about it.
Okay.
It stands to reason that the people who created the technology wanted it. That's the safest, parsimonious, Occam's razor assumption.
Or wanted to profit from it as a fairly simple drive as well.
Yes, absolutely. They wanted it, either they wanted to profit from it, but they would not have introduced it had they thought that they could not profit from it. In other words,
no
they
argument
would
there.
not have introduced this feature
Yeah.
had they believed that this feature would not resonate with people. They introduced an anti-intimacy feature or disintimacy feature because they thought, exactly like me, that people would love it. That's what my argument.
This reminds me of Zizek, actually, and I don't know if he addresses this directly, but how things do contain their own contradiction. So, the dating apps, like to your point, if you sign up to a dating app, they basically want you to not meet someone that you're going to match with so that you keep coming back and keep paying the fees. But it's only a contradiction because it professes to have one goal, the saleable goal, and then actually does the opposite. And this opposite thing isn't oh yeah, we thought you would resonate with the fact that, you're paying to meet the love of your life and you don't meet them. We thought that would resonate with you. No, that's part of the whole using it.
I'm not talking about the overt text. I'm talking about the technological choices.
Yeah.
They made technological choices that they knew would resonate with human psychology.
Yes, like meet the love of your life. That's the resonant
part. That's the overt text. These are not the features of the technology. The feature of the technology is disintimacy.
Yes.
The overt text is propaganda. The overt text is interpolation.
I agree with you completely, but the overt text is what provides the resonance. The resonance isn't in, I will never meet anyone. I disagree
completely. The overt text is not what provides the resonance. What provides the resonance is what the technology does for you.
Okay.
And what the technology does for you, it empowers you. It empowers you by rendering you self-sufficient, not dependent on other people, and able to disengage.
And in control, actually.
And in control,
yeah,
and so on.
Yeah.
So, interpolation is about creating a state of mind, as Althusser described.
Yeah.
And of course, it creates a state of mind, but the state of mind is the consumption state of mind. So the interpolation or the overt text or whatever you want to call it, the various thinkers and so on, is motivational. And what does it motivate you to do? To consume the technology.
Yes.
That's why Althusser's main work had to do with advertising.
Yeah.
Althusser dealt with advertising, and he didn't say that the message was about truth or reality. No. He said that the interpolation, the advertiser's interpolation, was meant to generate consumption. And similarly, Debord, in his work on spectacle, said basically the same. The spectacle was not about reality. It was not about truth. It was not about... The spectacle was a gateway intended to attract you into...
Yes, do you know what this sounds like to me? Exactly what you talked about before. The creation of a fantasy where it offers something that isn't actually the thing that you're going to get. But we as the purchasers of, say, dating apps, because we've been on that one, we're buying into the fantasy with the hopes of obtaining the lie that we're sold.
Yeah, but then...
And in that sense, I don't think that it's fair to say we're choosing our own isolation, because we've been pulled into this fantasy that we have not created.
But you're choosing to not opt out.
I think that people do opt out of online dating. I hear increasingly that,
not online dating.
I think
I'm talking about social media. I'm talking about social media.
I do think that people are increasingly doing so. Which is hilarious for me to say.
Absolutely fringe movement.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fringe.
Yeah.
On the very contrary, you have an explosion on TikTok and so on. So
we're not gonna be seen by the people who've given it up. That's for sure. We're going to be seen by the people who stay with it.
It's true that you've been lured and baited and lied to and deceived, but once you've been exposed to the technology and to the impacts the technology had on your life, you have chosen to stay. This choice is indicative of your state of mind. The people who designed these technologies constructed them so that they become addictive.
In that sense, addiction is... It renders, this is the issue I have with Sartre too. We don't have a smorgasbord of all choices. And I mean, to put it very colloquially, often you have the choice, in a very sort of, life is nasty, brutal, and far too long for some people. We have the choice between kind of shit and a bit shitter. We don't have like A to Z, wonderful, this would be great, this would too, oh God, where am I going to find the time? It's like, this will definitely kill me. This might kill me slowly. And I'm actually unsure what this will do at all. We have those kind of choices in everyday life, and it's not.
I'm a down to earth.
It's not like we're going A to Z. I am for this thing. It's kind of like, no, I just can't do that one because I'm pretty sure it will kill me.
I'm a down to earth kind of guy.
Yeah.
If billions of people are using a technology that isolates them, atomizes, prevents human contact, and they're still doing it 20 to 25 years later.
That's how addiction works.
That means they want it.
Yeah.
Addiction,
in a way that like you can want cocaine.
It means they want it, period. I don't like to hyper intellectualize. They want it. If people are using something for 25 years, by now they know the impacts of this technology, and they're still using it. Yeah, you could call it addiction. I don't care about the label. The fact is, I
think you called it addiction, actually. Yeah.
Similarly, if people are choosing pornography over real sex, it means they want pornography. Yeah. Period. It's undebatable. This is a choice. You can't ignore that. That is a fact.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's a choice to do it or not do it, right? But I think when we talk about choice, it does sometimes mislead, and it's part of the capitalist narrative too, that we have this freedom of choice of everything for everyone. Everyone has access to all of these things too, which is also not the case. There's, structural violence that prevents access to certain things. The choices aren't as, I'm doing this with joy and alacrity, as you said before. It's like sometimes, this is the only thing I haven't tried. I'll give it a go. It's still a choice, you're dead right. But it's not that sort of this is wonderful and therefore this is therefore a reflection of what I genuinely want.
So you're saying people are using these technologies for 20 or 25 years and they're actually very unhappy with these technologies and they're still using them.
I would say that's possible. Certainly I can speak here from the anecdotal evidence of someone who's gone through a long career of music, right? Having to use social media and hating it. And every time I've had a pause in that career, that's the first thing that goes. It's become, someone described it to me the other day, a friend of mine actually, it's become the monster that is present in our lives that you have to feed. Like if you have a small business, you have to feed it.
It is very self-exculpating. It's a victimhood narrative. I understand that. That's natural in the West today. But I can't buy that. The designers of this technology designed it to destroy intimacy. They knew it well. And then people exposed to this technology under false pretenses, there I agree with you, exposed to this technology, discovered its impact on their intimacy or in the intimate lives, and are still using it 25 years later. I would say that's a choice. In my book, that's a choice. And what are they choosing? They're choosing the technology, but they're also choosing the impacts of this technology.
I do agree with you, and certainly people do that, but digital detox is something that many people do or try.
No, many is a misrepresentation. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's a tiny fringe movement.
Yeah, neither of us have done a survey here, so you could be right.
Actually, there are public figures as to
the
the growth.
There? Yeah, on digital detox.
Not digital detox, but the growth in social networks. They're public companies.
Yeah.
They have to file with the Securities and Exchange Commission and so on.
Interesting.
So,
That would be interesting to see,
social
actually.
networks, some social networks are exploding, actually.
Okay.
That includes Facebook and TikTok.
Yes.
Instagram. They're exploding.
Anyway, I do want to get back to this question, Sam, if that's all right. If you could walk us through...
I would make one last point, and I will get to your question of overt and covert cycle.
Yeah.
The last point is that all these platforms encourage negative effects. They encourage anger and fear and hatred and envy. They encourage negative effects, and we should realize that negative effects help us to avoid other people. I mean, if we love other people, we want to be with them. But if we hate them, we don't want to be with them. If we're angry at them, we don't want to be with them. If we're afraid of them, we don't want to be with them. So here's a technology that destroys your intimacy, triggers your negative emotions and negative effects, and this
makes you hate people. Yes.
Makes you feel good with yourself as well, because you're saying you're self-righteous. You're saying,
I see what you mean. Yeah.
I hate people and I hold them in contempt and I'm angry at them and so on. But all this is because I'm a good person. All this is because I'm a perfect person or whatever. So,
and yet the emergent property is atomization again.
Yes. So it's not a side effect. It's not a byproduct. It's not accidental, unforeseen.
No, it is the system. I agree with you. Yes, I agree. I agree.
And majority of humanity, by now 2.1 billion is latest statistics, majority of adult humanity, have made their choice. They reside on social media and increasingly more so on artificial intelligence, and they avoid other people. Even if we disagree as to the underlying dynamics, and we clearly disagree.
Yeah, we do.
We cannot disagree. We cannot disagree when it comes to the facts.
Oh, absolutely.
These are the facts.
Yeah, it atomizes, absolutely. And it is the system, not some byproduct. I agree with you there. I do.
Yeah, it's systematic. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, it is systematic. Yeah.
Aloneness is an industry.
Absolutely. That's why I called it the loneliness industry. It is an industry.
Right,
it is absolutely an industry. Yes.
It's not only an industry, it's performative, it's a spectacle.
Yeah, I agree there too. I do. Yeah. Now, this is where I want to ask your perspective on something. Psychology does point to the fact that we tend to project our own reasons for doing things onto others. And it would probably be fair to say that both Sam and I do that in this interview. I'd love to hear it from you, because phenomenological arguments do count. How does it feel inside from your perspective? Do you, personally, turn away from others gladly, preferring the reflection of a machine? Do you turn away with another emotion, maybe frustration, resignation, grief, or something else? Or do you not turn away at all, with some particular emotion associated with that? Hope, also frustration. What emotions do you associate around not giving up on human connection if you haven't given up? Now, there's no one right answer here, right? These are the kinds of questions that help us uncover what's really happening in our lives and in broader society and our culture. So I'd really appreciate hearing your personal experience of these things. Now, in part 2 next week, Sam and I converge a lot more in our perspectives. We talk Western spiritualism, psychology, and more on the systems that shape us. Until then, the usual stuff. You can support us on Patreon. You can join the community on YouTube. There's going to be some videos that are just available for the community on YouTube, so please do join there. It helps keep the podcast going. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to reading your experiences around searching or not for human connection. See you then. Bye.